Thank you. My name is Mr. Okwir Isaac Odiya. I wear many hats. Professionally, I worked for the Justice and Reconciliation Project, which is an NGO that operates within Uganda with the concentrations in northern Uganda on the transitional justice issues. But I also support Wide Global Uganda in the strategic operation. So that is basically my professional life. My experience of the war in Acholi, looking at when I was young to now, I would say Acholi sub-region became a field whereby every groups and individual would exercise their hunger against each other. I think the series of armed conflict that has happened in Acholi sub-region by different groups of people against the government. And in the end, my experience is how have the civilian populations been involved and how interested were they in the conflict and how were they affected is the kind of my experience and understanding of the conflict in Acholi, that Acholi land went through numerous conflict and the civilian population suffered unknowingly, and they can't even explain why they got involved and suffered in that way in different proportion. Well, I would borrow the definitions of transitional justice from a policy angle. The world came out with a transitional justice policy, which may be called in different contexts, depending on how each country feels. But the intentions of the policy is to respond to widespread violent conflict that has kind of abused the different rights of citizens. This policy is there to understand and try to fix the wrongs that happen on the individual lives so that they're able to see justice. So in a layman way is, what did you go through? How can we and the government try to respond to the human rights abuses that you went through? And here we look at the combatant. The war that was fought should not be fought again. The war being fought should be brought to end, and then we should respond to the effect, the impact of the war that was fought onto the population and then the environment that people live in. But most importantly, to avoid repeat of similar mistakes that led us to that conflict. That is transitional justice. And all this time the Justice and Reconciliation Project have been dealing with some of these things to understand the conflict that was fought in northern Uganda and being fought. How is the experience of the different individual? What needs to be done to kind of fix the challenges or the problem that people went through? How can the future generation not see what the current populations have gone through? Is what I have been dealing with.
So what inspired your journey in terms of the career path when it comes to transitional justice?
When I was young, I was affected by this conflict. In a way, my experience as a victim may not be the same with your experience, with other people's experience. Everyone suffered differently. But at least I felt a kind of a fairly direct impact of the war on me. And then when I was nearing finishing my educations, there was a question that I asked myself: how am I going to contribute to improving the situations that people are going through? And that was a time when the IDP was at its peak. I think that was when the people ran, and they were all in IDP camps suffering different proportions. Several children were abducted and they're still in captivity. Several women were in captivity. So my interest was I should get an opportunity to give a helping hand. And having joined the humanitarian service allowed me to contribute in solving the effect of the conflict that the populations in Acholi sub-region and the neighboring community went through. So the motivations was, yes, I felt it. How about other people? Can I give a helping hand? So when I joined the Justice and Reconciliation Project, it was directly dealing with the issues of conflict, which inspired me to do more than I could do.
So these days, very many people visit and they say you can never tell that war happened, which could obviously reflect that memory of the war is not as visible. Is this something that you think is important?
That also depends on how we understand war. People do say there is peace, but the silence of a gun does not mean there is peace. And that's where I like it when you begin to talk about memory. How do we remember the conflict? We remember conflict differently. And in this conflict, in this context, I want to say that people have different memories of what happened. We remember the war that was fought in Acholi sub-region from how it has costed us in terms of economic well-being, in terms of psychosocial well-being. So when you begin to reflect the war in this manner, and then you will begin to realize that, ask yourself, how is my life, how is my economy doing at the moment? Then you remember that I used to have a livelihood means. I had herds of cattle that I used to depend on. You realize that you lost a number of properties that was a source of your livelihood. You realize that your loved one went missing and you have still not identified where that person is. You're still waiting for answer about where your loved one are. And these are kind of psychological tortures that we have. You realize that you are living with someone whom you know or probably suspect that he's the one who came and abducted you and he made you miss school, or abducted your father and your father has not yet returned, your mom has not yet returned. Wow, how do you look at a former combatant whom you suspect that he was among the group that have returned? This is where the role of memory becomes very crucial. How do we remember the war? Martin Luther made a statement that how can you remember your past in such a way that will not lead to a revenge? This is where, to me, memory is centered. How can memory help us reflect on the past and then positively help to build the future? Is the most important thing in memory and memorializations initiatives. Yeah.
Okay, so just to build up from what you just said, how can memory do exactly what you just stated?
We need to sensitize, educate, and teach our community what the war was. And this makes me begin to also reflect more on the war that was fought in northern Uganda. Was it a tribal conflict? Does it have tribal sentiment? Or is it a civil war? I think in my professional experience for all these years, I would say the conflict, the war that was fought in northern Uganda was misunderstood. It is a misunderstood civil war that made the population feel that so and so plan to affect our community or to affect me. This also has some level of origin from from the war that was fought on the governance. I think when the government changed at some point in 1980s, 1986, many fighters repatriated who were in the army repatriated back to northern Uganda, which was or is their home. And they came back home with the ammunitions, with the guns and the rest of it. So that kind of pose threat that there are groups of people that return and they're still armed. How can we ensure that we monitor, we prevent them from reorganizing? But also there is this kind of feeling that yes, we can still gain back the power, we need to reorganize. Now, looking at how Uganda is arranged, I also kind of blame the colonialists and the previous governance, how Uganda has been set up. It has been set up as per the different ethnicity. The Choli community, the Lao community, the Teso community, the Lugbara community, and Baganda or Seheva. So this made us look at certain issues as a tribe, as ethnic group. And we would say no, as such community, as a Choli, as the Teso people, as a particular ethnic community. So the fact that many of those people repatriated back, they felt like we can still. And that is the first understanding of a tribal nature of the conflict. Now looking at the very biggest which affected northern Uganda is the LRA war, which was led by an Acholi leader, Joseph Kony. When you interact with the different community, including other ethnic groups, they understand Kony War as a Acholi agenda. But is it an Acholi agenda? This is why I said it's a misunderstood civil war. The biggest question is, how do we tell our narratives, our stories, for everyone to understand that the LRA conflict and other conflict were civil conflict, not intended by certain groups of ethnic community against another ethnic community. Even in a Choli community, much as we look at it as a Choli war, but other community, the people of Pajong will look at it as the people of Odek has waged war to affect us. The people of Lamogi will look at the people of Odek as the Ugrume son against us. So this is the kind of narratives that people have failed to understand and tell it correctly. And this leads us to this looking at the conflict that has been fought in northern Uganda in a tribal context, which in my opinion, I think the story needs to be told differently. When we get to understand this carefully well, then we need to have the narratives told to inform memory and memorialization process. How do I remember an abductee who was once a civilian member of the community, taken to the bush, trained and brainwashed, and sent back to the same community to cause atrocities in different proportions? You get it? So here is when we understand some of this narrative, then we shall realize that I need to remember what happened differently. I have ever said that the most important things to achieve justice in northern Uganda and Uganda is through restorative justice. We don't need to look at the people, but we need to look at the issue. Because you are a victim because I came and set your houses ablaze, abducted you. But you have forgotten that I was also once like you. I was abducted, forced to hold ammunition and sent back into my own community. if you follow the narratives well, once you are sent to go and cause havoc and you don't do it, you are subject to punishment or even death. So what else do I have? I have to commit and do the right thing I've been told to do by my commander. So how can this inform how we remember what has happened in the past? So we need to tell a story that allows us to remember our past positively. Memory should help us to recollect ourselves together, to find a solution that can allow us fix problem of the past and avoid repeat of similar mistake in the future. Memory should be designed in such a way that addresses the psychosocial, economic, and political interests of the different populations that are affected, who have interest in what has happened in the past and how they want the future to be shaped. When this is done, then I believe that every individual would respect the story or suspect that the story of another person is similar to his or her own story. Yeah. I would want to start by answering it from who is the expert in remembering, and who should facilitate the memory initiatives. The mistake we are doing is imposing memory initiatives onto a particular population. I believe in the expert being the very people who wants to remember and how they want to remember it. So number one, we need to invest into the grassroots populations that we feel memory matters to them. How do they want to remember it is the most important thing. So moving forward, the component that needs to be paid attention to is the stories of the people needs to be researched and documented. And in documenting it, we need to document it the way they remember what they're saying. Research and documentations helps to understand the interests and the experts that are available. So we need to, the beauty is, these are things that has not happened for the first time. It happens in the past. And how have they dealt with it in the past? So this is where the experts in the community would come into play, so that it is done the way they used to do it. Others has got a lot of cultural values that needs to be respected and paid attention to. And this one deals with the psychological well-being of the individual. So we need to invest in how have you done memory and memorialization. A simple case is the current documentation method of having videography, photography, written text has not been there in the past. But how have you been remembering some of these events? Whenever probably people kill one another, there are rituals that are performed, and you realize that the jaw of that animal that was used to perform the ritual is kept somewhere in the house, and they know that this jaw was for this animal that was used to reconcile Odong and Opigo. That is documentation, that is memory. So that's why I'm trying to say we need to understand how it has happened before. However, the things are now, there is a dynamics environment that we are living in, whereby some of the research and the global trend comes into play. How does it affect the gender the population, how does it affect the young people, needs to be paid attention to. So in summary, I would say that yes, there are certain elements that calls for capacity enhancement and facilitation so that the experts begin to see it from another angle. So the most important thing is we need to invest in memory, in the experts, the locals, to run memory. At the moment, looking at the trend of event, there's a lot of political influence in the way we do things, and it has affected our memory and memorialization initiatives. I have said that we need to understand how it has been done in the past and how it can continue to be done. Professionally, I have engaged on this subject of memory and memorialization. I think one important success story which I would advocate that needs to be replicated is having it done in the interests of the local people. And here is when we created a memory committee. You may call it in any way, provided they share common understanding of what they went through. So when we have such committee, allow them to inform you on how they would wish it to be done. Now, where does the power of politics comes into play? This is what needs to be paid attention to. When this committee think of how best they can remember their past, the war, I realized that it has affected the economy of the local people in northern Uganda. And here comes, you need to be facilitated. And the power of money lies in the hands of the duty bearers. And most of them practice a lot of politics in their lives. So here is, I give you and you give me. If you want me to help you, I would want you to allow me also have my political agenda implemented in the memory and memorialization process. Without that, it can never happen. So it compromises the principle behind memory and memorialization, because there's someone who wants to support you, including even donations that we get and NGOs run to the field. The interest during the call for for proposals, the area of interest is very clear, and sometimes it is in the Western context. But it needs to be implemented in that way. So we end up influencing, you know what, we're giving you A, B, C, D, but this is how we want it to be. It moves it away from how the society feels it should be. Looking at the custodians of our society, the cultural institutions that we have, there was no poor cultural leader in the past, because it was the people that support the cultural leaders, be it the chief or whatsoever. But now the people don't have what they can take to the cultural institutions, and they have become poor and dependent on political leaders or people with economic power. So the implementations of these ideas borrows a lot from what the money giver wants as a result of it all. Now, this is also very true that any group of people who have influence needs to be managed in the interests of the state. So the state also has got influence on what they want to see happening and what should not be happening. Because in the end, it can affect the state security or not. And this comes with a lot of intimidation and the rest of it. I was once a victim of trying to facilitate community memory and memorialization, and the community said, we want a monument here to remember what happened And the monument should talk about the atrocities that happened in this community, list of people that died in this community as a result. So in that case, it was trying to tell story about how the people suffered during the regime. And such kind of stories needs to be not told anyhow. So there's a way that the states also influence memory ideas. This would be how I look at how politics would affect true memory initiatives. In my last submissions, I looked at 3 or 4 areas that needs to be paid attention to. In practicing memory, we need to look at truths. What has happened needs to be told. In telling these truths, it should help us to promote advocacy. How can memory initiatives help to demand for justice and accountability? When we talk of justice and accountability, it's not only from the government, it's not only from certain groups of leaders, but also at community level. A simple acknowledgement of wrongs that happen at community level or individual level is justice enough, is accountability enough. Memory should help facilitate reconciliation. Doing all this should help us understand the narratives and should allow us to say, I am sorry. To help us understand that we have shared challenges, and I think we can move on the same directions together. We can build a cohort to address our past and become stronger in future. This is what I will look at memory as should help to achieve this. In the end, we shall have remembered our past positively to shape our future. Most importantly, how do we ensure that the story of man comes out, the story of women come out, the story of the young people, children and youth come out. So in memorializing, where are these different categories of people so that we don't leave important issues untouched, but most importantly should help us to shape the future. If we don't bring the young one now, they're not going to understand the journey we have started and they are not going to embrace it. So they need to be brought into understanding of why we do remember and how we remember it and what we need to see in the future, so that in future they will be the one to shout it louder.